Hello everyone, and welcome back to the RimWorld Rags to Riches series, my good friends. Once again, as per the usual, I'm glad to see you back here with me today, where we have quite a bit of work to do. The city grows, and our construction grows with it. There is never any rest for the wicked. Today, to begin, I began looking around at the city, and I noticed our casino with its beautiful pool in the background there, but I feel awful thinking that someone would have to pay in the casino to use a pool in the entire city. It just doesn't seem fair. So Nino would meet with the city council, and as a token of their appreciation, they would actually build a public pool completely free to anyone in the entire city that is a resident. If you're renting a room, you still have to pay, but the 25 or so people renting out from us, they're good to go. This wasn't too far away from the casino with its pool. That way, possibly, if someone thinks they can go swimming there but they can't, there is a close alternative, and it's also pretty close to some of the rooms that we're renting out that are not all that close to the casino, and thus, once again, another option for them, of course. I was pretty proud of this little pool. It is very gray and boring for the most part, but I tried to throw in some planting and vegetation just to pretty things up. You'll notice in every single one of these in-ground pools, we also have 2 slides per. This is sure to get the youngsters excited and get them in those pools. Now, something else that they can do while they're here, no matter whether or not it's free for them to enter the pool or not, is purchase some delicious beverages or perhaps some snacks from our vending machines. I must say that my creative bug was beginning to itch a bit in my old noggin after building the public pools, and sticking with our theme of water-based amusement, I thought it might also be a good idea to add a little area outside of our more luxurious rooms that are across the street from the casino and add in some hot tubs. This is simply an extension of the spa itself. I initially wanted to try to give every single room their own hot tub, but for the ones that are already currently built here, I don't think that that's really a feasible idea. Perhaps we'll end up doing that for the extremely luxurious rooms that we have yet to build. Also, last episode, of course, as you probably remember, we ended up creating a specialized flag for our city and our company, so I wanted to put those outside of our little town hall meeting area here. It only seemed fitting, of course. A couple of days later, and I wanted to build yet another shop, though this isn't actually like any shop that we've built thus far. This is a specialized shop that is going to be specially catering to a specific group of our tenants in the city. Of course, anyone can shop here, but this is going to be more for our blue-collar tenants and workers. And of course, I am talking about a hardware store, a nice little mom-and-pop shop that's actually owned by our mega corporation, where you can go in and buy any and all tools that you may need. As long as the tools that you need are hammers, shovels, and or axes, because currently those are the only tools we have. Now, I realize selling tools might seem a little bit silly, but keep in mind that we actually have 2 tenants currently who are both in construction as their occupation, and thus I'm sure the 2 of them would love to purchase some of these tools and perhaps even some of their colleagues. We've also got vending machines all over the place, of course, as per the usual, and we also have some firewood outside as well in case anyone needs it for their chimneys or maybe a little campfire, I don't know. To help tie our brand new shop into the rest of the city, we ended up building a small alleyway right next to it with plenty of dumpsters to keep the area clean, and also an aircon unit to try and heat and cool this side of the city, of course, as well as any other structures we put in, one of which ended up being yet another apartment complex similar to the one that we built in the southeastern section of the city earlier on in the last video. Not really too much to mention here, but the apartment complex from last episode is quickly filling up, and thus once we have that one full, this one will be ready for new tenants on a moment's notice. Unfortunately though, our fun building around the city would be quickly interrupted by a prison break by Purple and Rulo. These no-good, dirty Outlander bastards appear to be sick of having their organs harvested, and they're trying to make a break for it. We wouldn't allow that, not one bit. Our security bots would rush in as quick as possible. Given the danger that the Outlanders could pose, we would open fire on them with little regard for their lives. Luckily, neither of them died. Luckily for them, and us, I suppose, because we're not quite done harvesting those sweet, sweet organs. Ooh, another kidney. I knew you had another one in there somewhere, Purple. Thanks. Meanwhile, back aboard our yet-to-be-named space station, our weary space travelers were getting a little bit bored. But worse than that, they were also getting quite hungry. The stockpile of meals that we had previously sent to them have been devoured, and they were in dire need for some of our fresh fruits and vegetables. So we quickly threw together a nice care package of steel, meals, and a little bit of cloth for them and shot it straight into the heavens to rendezvous with the station. Now you might be asking yourself, why would they need all of that steel, Rad Daddy? Well, let me tell you, not only do we plan on eating meals, but we also plan on expanding the station itself furthermore. Now, as you might imagine, I want our astronauts to be nice, cozy, and comfortable, of course, aboard the station, and part of that is actually going to be getting them their very own rooms. But also, as we begin to run out of room in our city on the ground and we're using up more and more land, perhaps we should begin looking towards the heavens to expand our enterprise and business, perhaps even renting out a few rooms aboard the station, or maybe, just maybe, even an orbital casino. But that's something we'll deal with in the future, a possible idea of sorts. As you can probably tell, and as we probably already know, this type of work in space takes a very long time, so we'll check back in on them in a moment. In the meantime, while we're waiting on this construction project to finish, I asked you wonderful people last episode for a wonderful name for our wonderful new android, and I have been happily provided the name of Lloyd. This more than dapper name is provided by our good friend Wolf Attack 4825. And of course, this name just so happens to be a direct reference to the bartender in the movie The Shining, which me and my lady rat recently watched as well, so it touches near and dear to the old heart. Speaking of our mechanical minions, utilizing the plasteel that we had mined from the asteroid last episode, we would have Jor begin working on 2 brand new Tier 3 androids. My dear friends, I introduce to you Addison and Diesel respectively. Created at separate times, and somehow still they appear to be twins, as it were. Addison here is actually going to be at the cash register in our teeny tiny restaurant that we built very early on in the series. Up until this point, I've actually had Lev split between the shop where we sell plushies and hot sauce and the restaurant, which is no bueno, and thus I'm glad to have some helping hands. Diesel, with his more fitting name, gives off more of a handyman kind of vibe, and thus I would actually have him manning the register in our hardware shop. Selling hammers and shovels, I'm sure they'll be flying off the shelves with his salesmanship. With that taken care of, I wanted to focus on a new project. You know, we've been doing so much trading on the road these days, and we do have our speedrunner truck, but for much larger shipments, I thought it might be nice if we built ourselves a semi-truck to load some of the larger objects. And perhaps one of the most important parts, it also has a closable and lockable cargo bay if, say, maybe you wanted to move 800 joints or something, I don't know. Okay, you got me. It's more like 600, but we also have plenty of leaves, and it also has a very distinct smell, if you will, so we need somewhere we can put it, close it, and nobody will know what we're handling. For now, we'll just load up all of our joints into our semi-truck and take it out. That way, if we were to get pulled over by the Marshal Service Police Force, we don't get all of our goods confiscated. For her maiden voyage, however, we're going to be going out on a trade mission to a nearby Republic City, the same one that Nino came from, as we're constantly trading with him. After arriving, I realized that our city by this point is 10 times better looking than this city, which is so funny because Nino used to daydream about what it must be like to be the mayor of this city while he was homeless here. How the mighty have fallen. Nevertheless, though, we could make sure that the fine folks of the city have some recreational lettuce sticks, if you will, to smoke on. However, they didn't have near enough silver to pay for all of our smoke leaf joints and our iced coffee, which we had a plethora of both in our truck, and thus we would be trading with several other settlements in the area before returning home. Now, traveling to all of these different cities and towns and trading with them all is going to take some time, so in the meantime, let's check back in at our space station. It appears to me that Wally and Matzi have finished up the southern wing of the station finally, adding in 3 bedrooms, if you can count Wally's as a bedroom technically, as well as a brand new storage room where we're also going to be keeping a few of our batteries for the time being, just so it's not so cluttered in our comms room. Eventually, of course, the hope is that we have a very large station at some point where we can actually keep several guests, and we'll have a massive storage area with its own battery room and yada yada yada. I'm sure you understand. Of course, though, these are things that come in due time, as our space program is still in its infancy, and thus we're going to need a bit of time and resources to go about doing this. We're still really focused on our city for now. Even so, though, I decided to send Wally out on yet another mission. We're going to be sending him off to the same asteroid that we've been mining previously, because sticking with our theme of expanding and working on the city, we need more and more plasteel for the city itself, and thus we're going to get some. This time around, we're leaving Laika and Matsi back home, where they would be enjoying some nice soda pop beverages in the meantime. Putting ourselves once again in a specialized orbit in the lander, we easily ended up catching back up with the plasteel asteroid, where Wally would land shortly thereafter. Our poor rusted compadre would immediately get to work on mining out these reservoirs of plasteel within its marbled stone. While he's doing that in orbit around the planet, our trade caravan had finally returned back home, pulling in and dropping off all of the silver that we had made. And I had also packed some hot sauce and forgot to sell it, to be honest with you. I didn't see it, so we only made this money off iced coffee as well as smoke leaf joints, and we made, I think, right around 9,000 silver, which was a pretty good haul. Back at the asteroid, though, Wally's energy reserves were about to deplete. His batteries were almost completely dead, and you might be thinking to yourself, damn it, Rat Daddy, how did you not know this was going to happen? It happened last time. Well, actually, I did. I had actually planned for this ahead of time, bringing the android pod and a fresh battery along with Wally. We were able to connect these up to the lander itself, that way we wouldn't be floating around in space, and Wally could easily charge his internal battery to full. Perhaps one of the greatest parts about this, though, is the fact that charging his internal battery to full barely takes any charge out of the actual battery itself, meaning that we could probably mine basically the entire asteroid of its plasteel without issue. We are still restricted by how much we can carry in the lander and also how long it takes to mine and construct and things like that in space, so back on the ground we're actually going to be working on our very next research project, which just so happens to be sterile materials like you would find in a hospital or possibly a laboratory. Speaking of which, just as an offshoot of our mission control building, we are actually going to be building a small laboratory where our scientists will be able to study materials that we bring back home from outer space, such as the uranium that we brought back from our first asteroid, the rocks that we took back from the North Pole, and hopefully some that we end up taking back from one of the moons, and anything else that we find out there, really. As we were finishing up construction, perfect timing, as we also finished our research into sterile materials, allowing us to build sterile walls and flooring in the lab. Of course, though, credit where credit is due, this lab was an idea by our friend Miss Moggy1, who made a great point by saying we needed a lab to test the samples that we're bringing home, because who knows what could be on them, which is very true, as there could be some type of alien bacteria, and we definitely don't need some type of space virus outbreak on the planet, especially not within our city, killing off all of our tenants and thus our profits. You'll notice in the entranceway there's a bit of an airlock section here in the corridor where people are expected to scrub themselves down so that they're nice and clean and they don't contaminate anything. And then the lab itself also has many different types of analyzers and different types of beakers and other things that you'll need to perform tests, of course. We also have a simple shower installed as an eye wash station just in case we were to get contaminated. And now with our lab complete, we would waste absolutely no time going ahead and analyzing the uranium that we had previously taken from the asteroid, though it has been sitting on the planet for quite a while, so if there's any bacteria, it's going to be hard to tell if it's from Degum or from the stars, but nevertheless, we'll do it anyhow. And though this little laboratory is fairly compact, I don't think that we'll have anything too large in here, and if we do, we can always expand it out to the south and to the east a little bit, but I'm pretty proud of how it turned out for the most part. For our next research project, I wanted to begin working on artisan furniture or artesian furniture, whatever it's called. It is the most luxurious furniture that we can actually build and that we have at our disposal, or at least we will once we get it researched, that is. While this research is ongoing, we would also have La and Jor begin sewing up some nice new suits. Just a couple of blue dyed jumpsuits for our astronauts. The next next time we ended up sending a care package that was stuffed full of some resources, alcohol, and a little bit of food. We would also send these jumpsuits along with it. The additional resources that we sent, like the steel, we would end up using to build something of an airlock on the front of the space station itself, just in our comms room. This will allow our dog Laika to have a very low chance of dying from asphyxiation and or hypoxia because of us letting all the air out of the room, and this will allow our spacemen to go around the station without their suits on whenever they please, as pointed out by our good friend Bushman9954. An excellent idea, my friend. I'm sure that they're getting sick and tired of wearing the bulky spacesuits inside with the fear of dying if they take them off. And by this point, we had also had Wally returning home from his mining mission over at the Asteroid. He would end up docking the lander and then releasing his cargo hold, showing off about 12 to 1300 plasteel, I believe, which is the most that we've probably ever seen. And this critical resource is also worth thousands upon thousands of dollars. There's still plenty left to be mined, but for now, this is all we could bring back. Now, in stark contrast to our private space company mining asteroids in orbit around the planet, back here on the ground, we're actually going to be building our very first fast food restaurant in the city. And to do so, we're going to be utilizing a new mod to the list, the Randy Burger Fast Food Set mod. I ended up building this on the outskirts of the city near the western entrance, just a little bit below the public swimming pool that we built earlier on in the episode. It's within close proximity to the coffee shop and the gym. Perhaps somebody wants a meal after a workout, or maybe just to have with their coffee, but also with it being so close to the swimming pool, I thought it might be perfect if you take your children there, and then of course they're hungry afterwards or during. As we were constructing our fast food restaurant though, we ended up getting our artisan furniture research finally completed, so once we're ready, we can build some of that. It was also by this point that we had finally finished our restaurant. As you can see, we have a large dining area right in the front where we're actually also going to be putting our cheeseburgers and sodas to go about selling them. We have a kitchen in the back with a food basket area where we're storing all the meats and vegetables to make the burgers, and I even included a drive-through window with a little drive-through box on the outside where you can order your meals if you're on the go. I also thought that it might be a good idea for this place to have a parking lot, seeing how most people are going to be traveling through here, and it could get pretty congested if everyone's trying to maybe use the drive-through, so I built one across the street. Nothing too fancy, just a little small one. Still, this begs the question of who is going to cook these meals, and to answer that, I think that we're going to need to send a care package from our space station of plasteel all the way back down to the city. For you see, my friends, I plan on using the plasteel that we've been mining to make yet another Tier 3 android, as that and the advanced components have been the only things holding us back thus far. I introduce to you yet another of our androids, this one currently going by the name of Wilson, though I'm sure you guys will provide a more proper name for him, as well as our other two that we created earlier. But anyhow though, he is not only going to be our android at the register, but also our cook. He's currently not very good at cooking, so hopefully these burgers don't give anyone food poisoning, though they will be dirt cheap, so no worries, I'd say. Besides, he'll get better with time as he continues cooking and increasing his skill, and thus the quality will get better as well. And just like that, my friends, we have our very first fully functional fast food restaurant that is actually totally automated if you consider the android an automaton, which he is. Now then, for our next little project of the episode, I wanted to go about upgrading Ninel's little mansion here, and to go about doing so, we're going to be replacing many of his items of furniture, such as his tables, his bed, and anything and everything in between with the artisan furniture instead. Basically, the exact same furniture that he already had, just with an upgraded gold engraved version that is much more beautiful and more expensive. I was pretty darn happy with how it all turned out in the end, and if you notice in the bathroom, we also upgraded his appliances like a bathtub and things like that with steel versions instead of wood, all except for his toilet, which we actually made out of solid gold. A little bit whimsical, sure, but I think that it really works as a status symbol of his wealth. And although these new furniture items were quite expensive and taxing on our reserves of gold, as you can see, we are still quite stockpiled on gold, silver, and a little bit of jade, and we're really finally beginning to fill this bank up. For our next research project, we are actually going to go about building Tier 4 androids. Now, I don't really have any particular reason for wanting to do this. other than just to have the greatest and best androids that are possible, we may very well add them to our defense force or possibly our station above. I've seen plenty of comments about that, so I think that might be what we shoot for. Speaking of our androids, I decided to go ahead and begin building our android security force, its very own building where they can go in and charge. This is going to be right next to Ninal's mansion and Jor's home. Specifically so we can always make sure we have our security force ready at a moment's notice to protect the both of them, of course. But we also wanted to build them their own facility, that way our garage at the police station isn't so cluttered with all of their recharging pods, and thus we can add more vehicles in or move the vehicles we currently have easier. And as you can see in the new building, we have plenty more room to add in more android pods as we continue expanding our security force. A bit of time later, we ended up getting some gold from the Republic of Libertas as something of a tip. Now, this happens quite often with gold components, silver, and yada yada yada, but this time in particular, it seems that their great stay in our facilities has left us with a new allyship with the faction, which is absolutely splendid because the better our relationship with them, the better the trade deals, as well as the more often that they'll actually come and stay at our nice place and spend their money in our shops and casino. However, they were not the only ones looking to get a little bit chummy with us, as we had some visitors from the United Traders Union. Ah yes, the great and honorable Dibbo, the original founding member of the United Traders Union and the current leader, as it were. This would explain the insane amount of defensive forces following him as his entourage into the city, with many of them being very large mechanoids who could quite literally destroy this city in a matter of hours. But also many drones that immediately began flying over the city and through our alleyways all over the place, making sure that it was safe for Dibbo's arrival. Incredibly impressive, I must say. Dibbo would enjoy himself at our nice steamy sauna where Ninal would join him, and the two of them would begin talking business. As Ninal approached, he had an offer for some established trade routes through this road. That way more and more visitors, soldiers, security forces, etc. would be coming through here and spending time in our hotels, spending their money in our shops. You get what I'm saying. It should also be noted the entire time the two gentlemen were having a conversation in the sauna, a very large mechanoid was guarding just outside, ready at a moment's notice. Dibbo, as a fellow businessman and respecting the success story of Ninal and his growing empire, kindly accepted this offer, under one condition. The United Traders Union would be given a preference and a priority over other factions when it comes to trading. And of course, Ninal accepted. And with that, my friends, our relations with the majority of the factions on this planet are doing quite splendidly, I must say. All except for the Oak Foundation, who, though they are neutral with us, seem to have a predisposition to hate us. Possibly because we had refused to attack the Marshal Service in last episode with our security force, though I can't be for sure. Though we do find it highly unusual seeing how the leader of the Oak Foundation, Lurkot, has quite a similar story to Ninal himself. Both of these gentlemen were slaves at one point in time, though Lurkot was a slave as a child and rescued, then also enslaved once more by the time he was a teenager. Nevertheless, the two of them have built their own empires with their own hands. Regardless, whatever his reasoning may be, it seems that we may have bigger fish to fry at the moment as we're being attacked by a tribal people from the Outlands. We had very little time to prepare, and Bryn was on the corner of the city when they walked in. They fired upon her, knocking her to the ground, though she didn't succumb to her injuries right away. We immediately began rushing our security force towards the enemies and all of our civilians inside of our fallout shelter. However, it seems that the tribespeople were delighted to be able to kidnap one of our own, being Bryn, and were quite frightened by our security force. Thus, they decided to kidnap who they could and run away. Unfortunately, Bryn was taken. We wouldn't even have a chance to battle them as the cowards knocked Bryn to the ground, caught our fields on fire, and ran away like the filthy bandits they are. These monsters have no morality. They didn't have a rhyme or reason. They just wanted to hurt someone and to take what wasn't theirs. To think that they would even try to light our fields on fire to starve out our populace. Thanks to our firefighting androids, we would easily be able to put our fields out, saving the majority of our crops, and thus we could let our people back out into the city. Fear not, not, Bryn, for they may have taken you, but they cannot hide forever. We will do everything within our power to find you and to bring you back home into our loving arms. And that is a promise. As the situation was getting settled back on the planet, back up at the space station, we had actually already commissioned for a brand new room to be built onto the station itself, with this being an observation deck. We wanted to have it completed before our special guest arrived at the station. Yes, our third person to ever go into space. Technically our second if you don't count Wally the android, but who am I talking about, you may be asking? Why, none other than Neenal himself. Now that he knows that this whole space travel and space station is safe, why the hell not? Utilizing a custom-built rocket that has autopilot installed and is going to be heading right for the space station, we would launch the CEO and the mayor of our city into the heavens. With such a simple payload aboard, we had no way to dock with the station, so Wally and Matzi would come out and get the boss man himself. Now, I realize this may seem a bit insensitive since Bryn was recently kidnapped and Neenal has pledged to find Bryn, but not to worry, as Jor and the others back home are working on the case, and they will find Bryn. It's only a matter of time. Matzi took some of the remaining patch leather that we had and quickly threw together a sleeping bag for Neenal. It wasn't exactly his usual accommodations, but given the fact that we're on a rinky-dink small station that needs many upgrades, it'll do for now. You know, after all this time, all that Neenal has accomplished and all of his wealth, he never once thought he was any better than anyone else. He never, ever looked down on anyone. But from this perspective, it's hard not to. Until next time, my friends.